In 2022, I used to come across videos on YouTube that were talking about the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, and I was really interested in what Nietzsche had to say. I found him very, very interesting. But one of the things that mostly disagreed with Nietzsche was his take on equality and institutions in society, like religion and other maybe marriage institution. And I'm not going to be accurate on this one, but I'm just going to paraphrase what I got from the videos that I used to listen about Nietzsche. So there was this idea of equality and how weak people are the ones who have actually created these kinds of institutions to get the strong people to level with them, to get the great men, to kill the great men in society. For example, like Christianity, saying that the idea that we are all equal in, okay, we are all equal as human beings, not in the eyes of God, because in the eyes of God, we are definitely equal, but here on earth, human beings can never be equal. I used to really disagree with Nietzsche on that, and I did not understand at that time why Nietzsche was so harsh and so strict and saying that, yo, man, not everyone really deserves the crown. So at that moment in time, I used to disagree on Nietzsche on equality. But as years have unfolded, I do agree with Nietzsche now, and it's really funny that there's this saying in the Joker, I believe, the Batman Rises, where the Joker actually says that it's either you die a villain, you die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. So I don't know if I took the villain's arc or it's just life experience of life that has tampered with the innocence that I used to have when I was younger. And how I came to understand that human beings are not equal was first of all when I was just in a corporate setting. And when we are in a corporate setting, I came to understand that those institutions actually do not really want people to stand out. When you are an employee, for example, in a company, those people really do pay you well for you to just be a good person. There's a box they've created for you, and you're not supposed to get out of that box in any way. And they want to, okay, it's not like they do it this consciously. I think this is just something that is done unconsciously. And in one way or the other, if you try to stand out in one way or the other, you're definitely going maybe to, for lack of a better word, to be sacrificed or be chopped off from the team or exiled. And this experience came to me, it was quite painful to realize such things because when I was in the corporate setting, I used to be a salesman. So I rose quickly up in the corporate ladder, and my skills and my foresight and my great understanding of people and their problems was what made me stand out in selling products to them. So this really earned me a lot of commissions then. But in that time, I'd never understood that this good that I was doing was actually causing me more harm than good in the eyes of the people who owned the company, because these people used to also make a lot of sales. Sometimes I made sales more than they did at that time. So I did not know that that would get me in trouble. I actually thought that I was just doing a great thing. And as I was there, I was a person who was asking questions, always challenging systems that I actually thought never worked, and trying to come up with new systems. And I was really proactive, and this proactiveness is actually what got me a lot of success. But unfortunately or fortunately, I can't explain the details to you as of now, but what I can just say is I lost my job and I was fired unfairly, and that was actually quite a painful experience. That was last year, and I really came to understand how human beings work. Actually, there's really a dark side to human nature that I don't know many people are not that aware of, but when you are in, especially in a team or a groups, and you try to stand out in one way or the other, you'll actually, the group will look for a problem and they'll scapegoat you. They'll use you as a scapegoat to justify something they've done or they have not done, or they just look for reasons to get rid of you. And these are really one of those dark sides of human nature. And the modern world has been built on a lie that we are all equal, that all human beings are equal. And I remember I was making a video on Instagram and I was talking about C.S. Lewis critiques on public education, on modern public education. And his critique, his main critiques was that the modern education is making the students who are more intelligent and more capable to be at level with the mediocre ones. There's a famous line he says that You cannot put a student who reads Dante or Shakespeare in a room with someone who is actually struggling to spell A, B, C, and D. And that's the reality of the modern world and the institutions that have been built around the modernity. For example, what I don't know if there's another example I can use. I wanted to use marriage, but I think marriage has to be there as an institution to tame the human desires and instincts, because human instincts and desires are quite untamable, for a lack of a better word. But this equality, then I can also use democracy as a tool that is used to make human beings believe themselves to be equal. For example, Socrates with his main critique on democracy, when he said that you cannot have people who have different moral integrity voting into having the same voice when they are voting. For example, you cannot have someone who has an IQ of below 85 and someone who has an IQ of above 130 to have the same voting power in an election. And that's the world that we live in, that these people actually do have the same voting power. And you can also not have hardworking people who are the most productive in the society, to be voting with the people who are the laziest in the society. And again, this is the problem that we do have in these modern times. And there's also the lie that men and women are equal. And as we can see in the dating world, the dating world is getting worse and worse because of this false presumption that human beings are equal. And when you look into the issue of men and women, for example, just for in the physical appearance, men are just stronger. Women are not that stronger. Women have wider hips. Men do not have wider hips. Men are taller, and there's a lot of differences in just men and women. There's also differences in groups. There's also differences between white people, Asian people, Indian people, African people. But all of this we've been told does not exist. All of this we are all told that, hey, you're just a human being and you should love your fellow human beings. And it's true that we should love everyone, but we should also be very, very careful about how we give this love, because giving love without respecting innate differences between peoples, that is just not the kind of love that cannot qualify to be called as love. I don't know what it is, but that cannot be qualified to be called as love. One of the things that I came to understand really about the world that we live in is the strong people are actually the victims of the weak people, and weak people are really driven by resentment. Weak people are not good people, and weak people are the people who cannot be a good person if you're not a strong person. And there's this naivety, and I will not call it naivety. I think it's just guilt trip and manipulation, where you're just told that the modern way that the good has been sold to us is just you're supposed to be meek, you're supposed to be humble, and not causing any trouble. And Nietzsche's argument in this matter, and again, I'm going to paraphrase what I learned from those YouTube videos, and I'm going to make a commitment to read the books he wrote himself, so I can have a better understanding on what he said. But he said that you cannot claim to be a good person when you cannot cause any havoc or damage. A person who is a good person and a really good person, I learned this from Jordan Peterson. He used to say that you need to be a warrior who has his sword sheathed, I mean. And if you cannot really use a sword, and if you're not dangerous but in control, then you cannot really qualify to be called as a good person. And what I came to understand about weak people is they're really driven by resentment. And I'm going to use examples, quite a number of examples to drive this point home. For example, if you're going to give a group of people, let's say 10 people, to compete with the same resources, and you'll quickly find out that there's just the group which will be better organized, the group which will have clear hierarchies and clear goals, and maybe, for lack of a better word, a revolutionary leader, which just a good leadership, and people will just respect the hierarchy. They'll quickly build fast, and when they build fast, they will certainly excel. than maybe a group that is disorganized, a group that is not quite smart, is not quite intelligent, is going to lag behind the group that has created heaven on earth for itself, for lack of better phrase. So what happens with weak people is when they see these clear differences between people and see that there are people who are more capable than group A is more capable than group B, what these guys will say is not like, hey, these guys are good, we are supposed to learn from what they've done, and we need to organize ourselves better. We need to organize our structures better. These people will not say that. These people will say, this group A has succeeded because they are oppressive and they have done it at our expense. And now there will be that hate. This is one of the darker realities about the human experience. They're just groups of people who are just innately better than other groups. And when these groups stand out, the other groups that have not stood out will not take it lightly, will not take it better, will not they'll take it personally and they'll see it as, hey, these people are just oppressive, these people are just not okay. I remember in 2023, I came across a quote which was supposed to, I don't know what was the aim of that quote, to be honest. It said that if a rich person makes money, it's called business, and when a poor person does the same, it is called robbing and stealing. And I do understand that there are corporates and very bad people in businesses who actually make profit of other people's suffering. But also, there are just people who have made their profit by empowering people. For example, Henry Ford, there's George Westinghouse. There are just these great business magnates who have just made their money off empowering and adding to the universe. But when you see a quote like this one, you okay, is the solution to get rid of all businessmen and never have rich people in the society? Or what is the solution? Or is the solution just going to the bad people who have made their wealth shadily, so that the good people can rise in the society? And this is actually the one of those cases that the weak people use against strong people, and the strong people mostly in the society are guilt tripped. Strong people walk in shame, they walk in guilt, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they've been told, hey, your very success makes me feel bad, and because it makes me feel bad, you are not supposed to exist in any way. And that's really the world that we live in. And it's a harsh world, it's a tough world. And I remember, again, just to use the example of how I got fired from corporate. I was actually told that, hey, your success is making other people feel like they are lagging behind. It's making them feel bad. That was literally what these guys told me. And I'll never forget that because I was so shocked. Because I was okay. I don't want to put myself in the middle of this conversation and make myself like the guy who is the victim here and crying out. And this is actually a great story, not a great story, but a great discussion and an important discussion that needs to be discussed out there. But the point of I'm just using myself as an example because this is the particular moment I came to realize that the world that we live in, man, the world that we live in is not straight. It's not like the way we were taught when you were growing up. When you were growing up, you were told, hey, you're supposed to do everything to fight for poor people. You're supposed to fight for poor people's rights and blah blah blah. But when you grow up and you start to realize, and this is another example of how I've come to the conclusions that I've come to. When you look into people who are not, this is just poor people, and the question is, what has gotten them to that place in life? And I'm not going to say that there's only one answer to this, but I'm going to say that if you look into the culture of maybe these people spend money, how these people work hard, okay, their work ethic and things like that. And I know there are systemic problems in the society. I'm not going to just put a blind eye to that. It's there, and poverty in many ways is something that is manufactured. I've actually come to understand many things about how the life that we live in. But what I'm trying to point to is there's also that they are just actions that sometimes people do, and they do lead them to be in the position that they are. And sometimes you might find maybe someone gets money, they drink it all. Sometimes they just spend money unwisely. Sometimes I don't know, they're just resentful, and this resentment actually keeps them in a loop. I don't know. I'm just saying that there's also that self-inflicted pain that many people we consider poor have caused to themselves. And okay, let's say okay, that's I know that's might be a harsh example, but I do think it is a true one. And there's also, even if you look into, for example, I'm a, I'm in Africa, I'm in Kenya. Kenya is considered a third world country. When you look into why Kenya is not successful as a country, we were colonized. When you go and ask the average Kenyan person, hey, why do you think Kenya is not successful? They tell you, hey, we have IMF debts, we have this new colonization thing, we have all these multinational corporations that keep us poor, and we have all these things, all these external forces that are conspiring against us to keep us poor in perpetuity and keep us dependent on them. And you, when you hear those points, yeah, they they can actually convince you that, hey, that maybe that's true, and maybe that's the reason why Kenya is underdeveloped. But when you go and start to look into Kenyan politics and just look into how Kenyan people behave and look at how Kenyan people have rewarded their leaders over the years, then you also start to get the picture that, hey, maybe these other problems do exist, but these other problems are the main cause. For example, I'll just use the many examples that are here. And how many times have we, as a Kenyan people, elected corrupt leaders that we know have corruption scandals, but we just put them there? How many times have we seen money meant for health misappropriated? For example, right now as we speak, we have a very, very big issue in health crisis. And our health crisis is, I don't know if there's any country which has it worse than us. If there's any country that has it, or has it worse than us, then I don't know. We have patients who are supposed to go to chemotherapy. They cannot attend chemotherapy at our biggest hospital in Kenya, the Kenyatta National Hospital, because people have stolen the money meant for chemotherapy. And there's also issues that many hospitals don't have ambulances. Many hospitals, patients share beds. They just lack basic commodities, the basic necessities that are just there to make a hospital run. They are not there. When you look into our politicians, they fund goons. There are stories about politicians, not politicians, but police officers working together with goons to fund them through the politicians to make even a paramilitary. Like there's cases of gangs having guns from the police. There are cases where there's a story that I've just seen on Twitter right now that the governor of Nairobi, Kenya, is giving these goons uh, equipment for communication that is used by the police, the walkie-talkies. So when you start to look into the problems of the people who are considered poor in the society, like just Kenya as a society in the world, you really start to understand that, hey, maybe these problems that we are facing are because of these other self-inflicted problems, which I believe they're the main cause. And when you look into the average Kenyan, for example, they tell you like, hey, Europe is the reason why we are here. Europe is driving, we are not, and they are the thieves. They are the thieves. But just a close introspection of the situation, you'll actually come to find out that, hey, maybe these other people, they're just better at what they do. They're just better in creating systems that work. They're just better in organizing. They're just better in having hierarchies. We are not. And maybe that's actually one of the reasons why they are better than us. And when you go to their cities, you see that they're well planned. You see that there are pavements. There, when you just go to a normal road, I can say the average road there, you find there are basic. Sorry, you'll find that there are bicycle lanes, pedestrian paths. Everything is just maybe simply but well organized. There are no overhead cables. The sewer system is working. Public transport. There are no matatus entering into the cities, causing a lot of unnecessary traffic jams. But when you come into our side, you see like, hey, we have all those things that these people don't have, and there is no conspiracy from any multinational government to better organize our city. We can simply just decide to wake up and organize our city. We can simply wake up and decide, hey, we are not going to litter this environment. Hey, we are not going to tolerate politicians giving us handouts while they have not delivered the kind of delivery of the service that we voted them there to deliver. But hey, we have not done that. And when you look into the colonized countries, for example, like Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, these countries are actually doing way better than us. They have lower corruption rates. They have used their debts wisely. They hold their leaders accountable. We don't. That's why they are developing. That's why we are not. They are hardworking people. Maybe we are not that hardworking, and that's the reality of how things work. And but when you go to someone who is weak morally, someone who cannot take account of honestly an honest account of where they are as a people, where they are as a person, and try to hold them accountable to the greatest extent, a weak and morally person will always resort to blaming something. They always blame something, blame someone, but there is very little responsibility that they take on. And this is the danger that the weak people pose on strong people. This is the danger that weak nations pose on stronger nations. And that's really the way it is. Many people do blame many of their unwise decisions to other people instead of looking into the mirror, taking a long hard look, and actually accepting that maybe some of their faults are from their own actions. And this is the danger that I came to realize, and this is why I came now, after 2 3 years of listening to those videos talking about nature and equality. Now I can say that, hey, I really don't believe in equality at all. I don't believe in equality at all. I don't believe men and women are equal. I don't believe all the races are equal. I don't believe I don't really believe even family members in a family are equal. And by there's also the Pareto distribution that actually shows this, the 80-20 principle, that 20% of your actions account for 80% of your results, and 80% of your actions account for 20% of your results. And that's simply how it works. When you look into the pair of shoes you have, for example, you have 10 pairs of shoes, you'll actually find that you mostly wear 3 pairs or 2 pairs. The rest of the 8 pairs is not like they bore you, but I don't know. I don't know why that happens. When you look into your closet, you'll actually find that, hey, I do wear 20% of my clothes. 80% of them are just there. I don't know, understand. I've really never understood why these things work like that. But they just work like that. Even if you look into the wealthiest individuals in the world, but I'm not going to go deep into this because I've come to understand that many billionaires are not actually are not what we can call people we can look up to morally. But anyway, the top 1% of the world account for almost half of all the wealth in the world. So this is just something that shows itself up. It's just something in the natural distribution of things, that 20% of the people in this world are the most productive and 80% aren't. And even if you look into any corporation, even if you look into how people just work, you come actually to find out that, hey, this Pareto distribution actually is pointing us to a reality, to a reality about our universe. If you are trying to understand the reality about our universe, that, hey, People are not equal, actions are not equal. Even in your life, there's this saying by Lenin. I can't remember it correctly, but he says that there are actually weeks that decades happen, and there are decades where maybe nothing happens, and then just weeks that actually decide what decades will become later. And that's really how life is. The modernity feels very misaligned because we have actually took false notions of how our life works. We've said men and women are equal. We've said people from races are equal. We've said I don't know. I just don't agree with it because it's not true. And you as a great person, yeah, don't really allow yourself to be pushed down by weak people, by people who want you to be at their level because they want you to also be resentful like they are. And don't allow that in your life. Just shine your light in the world, continue going forward. Don't let people who are beneath you to take you to their level. Always go up and level up. Till next time.